Great, thanks so much. Welcome everybody. This is the City of Eugene Ad Hoc Committee on Police Policy Reform. Welcome. Due to Governor Kate Brown's Stay Home, Save Lives executive order to stop the spread of COVID-19, this meeting is being recorded and taking place on Zoom. For more information about how to access and participation, you can go to the City of Eugene website. Before I get started tonight with my opening comments, I would like to turn the microphone over to Kaz.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Before we start tonight's meeting, there's some news we need to address. As some of you may be aware and others may not, there was an incident, I believe, in the Whitaker neighborhood earlier this morning. And these are the facts as they've been relayed to me. EPD officers responded to a 911 call of domestic violence and violation of a restraining order. The caller also stated that the suspect was armed with a knife. Officers located the suspect in a nearby alleyway, and they allegedly advanced on the officers with the knife. Officers fired 2 shots and hit the suspect with both shots. We know that the person is in hospital with potentially life-threatening injuries. We also know they are a person of color. I don't have any more details than that. I thought it was important to address at the top of the meeting and to remind committee members that, that this is an ongoing investigation, that we don't know the full facts yet, and it happened this morning, so it's very, very early on. I think this incident drives home the gravity of the work this committee is doing. But while there may be a temptation to discuss it, I would strongly encourage everyone here to focus on the business at hand. What we have before us is incredibly important work, not to detract from the incident that took place, but until we know more, we need to be very, very careful about speculation about what we say. It may be that at a later stage, this committee needs to discuss what happened today. But for the time being, again, I just ask everybody to focus on the matters at hand and to try and move our way through the agenda as quickly and smoothly as possible. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kaz. And welcome everybody, welcome attendees, welcome participants. I've just got a few things here that I would like to cover before we get into the meeting. Number one, scheduling the subcommittees has been challenging to say the least. Moving forward, we will now aim for quorum for those subcommittees being the most important thing. And that's how we are going to be scheduling those meetings. Kaz has sent out doodle polls for the 2 subcommittees, use of force and community oversight. And I believe most folks on the subcommittees have responded. So we will be scheduling those meetings shortly and we will let you know. Number 2, I'd like to report that committee member Joshua Purvis has resigned from the committee. Number 3, we have, as you know, this is a City of Eugene Council, City Council committee, and some members of the council have suggested a way that we might better focus our conversations, better focus our recommendations and motions moving forward. So I would like to, I will read you this 3-question format that I'd like you to consider. I will paste it in the chat box so that you can refer to it during the meeting, and we will certainly include it in the information packet that goes out after this meeting. So as we think about recommendations and motions moving forward, consider these 3 questions. Number 1, being specific as possible. What is the problem that you are trying to fix or the issue that the community is experiencing? Who experiences this problem most? That is the specific communities within Eugene. Number 2, what specifically and clearly is your recommended change or motion? And number 3, how do you think that the recommended change will achieve the desired result? Council members have suggested that this format will help them consider the recommendations and better understand the recommendations coming out of this committee. And in a moment, because I've proven that I cannot multitask, I will not attempt to speak and type and put it in the chat box, but I will do that shortly. And finally, I would just like to remind folks that there is an opportunity to participate in what's called the the community engagement, the Community Safety Initiative engagement session. Many of you have received emails to that effect. There is an opportunity to participate in that process. And if you go to the City of Eugene website and search for Community Safety Initiative engagement, you will find more information. I encourage you to do that. Okay,
Sorry,
I
Kevin.
am done. Yeah, sure.
Yep. Just a couple of quick things. First of all, on the Community Safety Initiative, many of the people, in fact, all of the people here are representatives of organizations. And we would encourage you to share that information. I will send it out after the meeting, although you may have received it already. The more people that we get participating, the more likelihood there is that we have an effective, meaningful, engaged process that really hears all of the voices in the community. So that's the end of the CSI plug. And Kevin, I believe there's also a question, a request for clarification in the chat.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Cassie. This is why we have a team. Appreciate that question. Yes, Silverio.
Yeah. So I was wondering if the other subcommittee dealing with community oversight had a guest subject matter, what was the term, specialist on their meeting as well.
In their first meeting, sorry, I'll field this because I was facilitating that. In their first meeting, yes, they did. They had Cindy Coleman from EPD, and they also had Leah from the city. Sorry, the title skips my mind. The police auditor's office.
Deputy police auditor.
Yep.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. All right. Now I'm going to toss it over to Mo, who's going to introduce some folks who had the pre-recorded presentations. And I will step out of the way and I will type in the 3-question format that I mentioned.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight. I know it's been a hard day for lots of reasons. I'm going to just pass the mic to 4 of our employees from the City of Eugene, 2 from the police department, and 2 from the City of Eugene Employee Resource Center. And as someone who has a name that sometimes gets mispronounced, I'm going to let y'all introduce yourselves.
Well, I'll jump in and go first. My name is Randy Bowers-Payne, and I am the Employee Resource Center Director. And I'm glad to have 2 of our colleagues with us tonight.
I'm Nicole Dahlke, and I'm an Employee Resource Center Manager.
I'm Stacy Sandy. I am the Senior ERC Analyst on the Public Safety team.
Ron Tinsa, a lieutenant with Eugene Police. I work in finance and administration.
I'm Angie San Miguel. I'm the training lieutenant for the police department.
So thank you for that. And this is your opportunity to share any information that you wish that you would have included in the videos with this group before we move to a question and answer portion. So I'll give you a chance to think on that, and no pressure if you have nothing else to add. All right, I counted to 10 in my head, and that tells me you don't have anything to add. So that means that group, if you have follow-up questions, now is your chance. I'm going to try really hard to watch both screens, but as always, raising hands is the easiest for me because I've got the participant list just in my center of vision. I see Midas has a comment, so we'll start with you.
Hi, yes. Sorry, I'm pulling my notes up super quickly. I have a couple questions. Should I split it up or ask them all right now?
Let's start with one and see what happens.
All right. I know that there was 5 people total in the training committee. I was wondering how many of those people are FTOs. How many FTOs do you have? Yeah.
The training division, we have 5 officers.
Mm-hmm.
And currently, because they're assigned to the training division, they're not acting as FTOs, but all of them have been field training officers at some point in their career, as have myself and the training sergeant.
Got it. Sorry. I guess my question is, how many field training officers do you have?
Approximately 25.
Okay. And then is there currently any sort of like direct way to report things about your field training officer for the recruits? Do they have like a reporting process or some sort of oversight on the FTOs themselves?
Yes, there's oversight on the FTOs, both by the patrol sergeants who monitor their day-to-day activity, and then by myself and Sergeant Soulsby, who review the daily observation reports that they fill out every day on the recruits. So we monitor it that way.
Okay, and that was Sergeant who?
Soulsby?
Okay. And then is there any way, let's say a recruit has an issue with their FTO, is there an easy way for them to report that currently?
Yeah, they would go through the chain of command. They would probably start with Casey Freilich, who's the lead training officer, and he's the one that directly runs the academies. And then the next in the chain of command would be Sergeant Soulsby.
Okay, thank you. And then my other questions are unrelated. Should I wait for someone else or just ask them now, Mo?
I'm gonna call on a couple more folks and then I'll put you back in the queue.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. So I see Brian has his hand up.
Hi there. I just have a question for each of the members who are here this evening. Individually, can you state whether or not you support more strict requirement for officers to de-escalate rather than the mere to endeavor to escalate? Thanks very much.
Can you clarify who you're asking that to?
Oh, I was asking if each one of the members who are here could individually answer that question. So
The members of this committee or the folks who came to present to you all tonight?
I'm sorry?
The members of this committee or the folks who came to present tonight?
The folks who came to present tonight. Thank you for allowing me to clarify.
So Mo, I
So that
don't
was
know
a
if
question.
did you have an order you wanted us to go in to respond, or just popcorn it around?
I think popcorn only because I can't, like, you're not all in a nice little row on my screen.
Okay. Brian, I appreciate your question very much. It is my belief that we should be adhering to the laws as they're written, and that we have officers who work tirelessly to try and carry out those laws as they're written and consistent with their training and education.
So I hear you say that no, you don't support a more strict requirement to de-escalate, that you feel the endeavor to de-escalate is sufficient. If I'm wrong, please let me know.
Yeah, I of course value anyone's life, any human being's life, and of course value communication and de-escalation wherever that's reasonably possible. Absolutely, that's an absolute.
Brian, if you want all 5 or 6 folks to answer, I'm going to ask you to not have follow-up questions.
Fair
Yeah,
enough.
just a time check here. We've got 30 seconds.
Anyone else want to chime in?
Lieutenant Ron Tinseth, if nobody else is coming forth.
Brian, most situations that are requiring de-escalation of some type are fairly fluid and dynamic. I think that whenever possible, our officers do that, and we receive training in that. So, whether we talk about semantics about the word or not, I feel like our agency does a very good job at this and does it whenever possible. So I think the situation drives most encounters, like what I believe you're trying to get to.
Yeah, thanks very much. I hate to interrupt, but we have very limited time, so I'm going to ask Lieutenant Angie Sam what her opinion is.
Sure. Like we train in de-escalation quite often, and quite often situations arise that our internal affairs office and the auditor's office deal with, where we look at a situation, we watch the videos, and we determine, should there have been more escalation? Did the officers do enough? Do we think they should have done more? And that is like a continuing process. So while I think overall our officers do a good job, I do think the policy could be tightened up a little bit as far as our de-escalation policy. And I think it could be a little more specific as far as the policy.
Thank you very much. Is there somebody, do we have time for one more?
No, I'm sorry.
What?
We can come back around to you, but it's been.
No, it's fine. I didn't.
Okay. So I've got Justin, then Marty, then Midas. So Justin?
Yeah, so I just have a question in regard to training. Why is it that EPD does not require or have any required training in regard to implicit bias, and that's only done by the state? And then the follow-up required for stuff like that, specifically I saw in ethics, is 1 hour for every 3 years. Do you think implicit bias, is that a training that should be revisited more often than that, and more often than just that one-time training at the academy?
So the 1 hour can you hear me? The 1 hour ethics class, was decided upon by the state. We have no involvement with what the state requirement is. Implicit bias, we actually do ongoing training in our in-service trainings, even though it's only required annually. We over the years have done various types of implicit bias training.
Is that training optional from officer to officer, or why is it not required?
It is not optional. When we create an in-service training day and we train 9 months out of the year, officers are required to attend training. Okay, so if we put the training on, they're required to attend. So we do a lot of training above the minimum requirements for both the state and for the city. When I showed in the spreadsheet was the minimum requirements, but we quite often do more.
Okay, are there measurable results for that training, and how do you judge how do you judge the frequency of how often you need to do a training like that?
There's generally not measurable like tests or outcomes from the class. I think where it's measured is their officers' performance in the field. Do we see problems arising with complaints coming through the auditor's office? Is the supervisor or other officers noticing anything inappropriate? So I think it's measured that way, but it's not measured at the completion of the class as to, whether or not they understood the material and are utilizing it moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Marty?
Yeah, I'd like to know if we could be provided, the committee could be provided with a list of the outside contractors that EPD uses for their trainings. Also on the comprehensive background checks, would you, when doing a comprehensive background check when you're hiring, would you know if someone left another police department as a disciplinary action, or if they resigned while they were being investigated? Would that information come to you during that background check? And if it does, would that affect their application?
I think that's probably mine. Our background investigators go and talk to previous employers and look at, we get a release from the applicant to look at their personnel file and any disciplinary actions, their IA history for the other police department in question. So yes, it would come out. It's not a national automated search or anything. I know there's talk about creating something like that. But yes, our background investigators would find that information out, and we would then weigh it as we look at the situation, and it most certainly would affect hiring decisions.
Okay, thank you. If I have more time, on the psych evaluation, is there an element of the psych evaluation that screens for, I'm going to enclose it in warrior mentality, that including possible white nationalist ties and, just racial, just an extreme, what was the word I was looking for? Racial bias. Is there something in the psych evaluation that would screen people for that?
We ask quite a bit of questions in our background about that. And then I'll leave it, maybe Nicole or Stacy might have the answer to the screening questions that Cerise gives.
So Ron, I'll jump in here and try and respond. So Marty, the evaluation is consistent with national standards for police officers across the country. It screens for a variety of variables and readiness for the job of a police officer as the current standards would be applied. And so there are a number of medical conditions, mental health included, that are screened for, and that list is comprehensive and again would be consistent with national standards.
Okay, well, that doesn't really tell me what the EPD is looking for in a person. I mean, nationally, it doesn't look too good from what we know from FBI reports about infiltration of white nationalists and what we're seeing nationally. So I guess I'm wondering if there is an interest in the EPD to screen out a sort of adversary mentality towards civilians. In my work, I've spoken with people who have retired from law enforcement, and they've shared locker room talk that happens where civilians are referred to as scumbags and dirtbags, and that kind of mentality is something that I would hope our police department would try to circumvent and eradicate. How am I doing on time, Kevin? Do I have time for one more?
You've got 40 seconds, Marty.
Okay, will to kill, it's part of firearms training in some police departments nationwide. I know that some of this happens at the State Academy. We have our own firearms training. Is there an element of our firearms training that trains officers to suppress their emotions and override that so that they are ready to kill unconsciously, to pull out the gun and fire?
No, our training involves managing stress when you're in a stressful situation, which an officer involved shooting obviously would be, but it doesn't necessarily train you to, automatically override your logical thinking. We try to train people to think as they're going, think through the situation as it's happening. If you have to take a tactical pause, you have to take a tactical pause and get your bearings. We try not to have people just, flying off the handle, so to speak. And
So your training does not.
And I have never heard the term will to kill, so it's not a term that we use at EPD because I've never heard it and I've been here 30 years. So
It's part of the killology school of firearms training. Okay, thank you.
All right. So I've got Kaz asked to chime in, and then Midas, Jason, Macy, Justin, and Lindsay. So Kaz.
Yep, just a very brief one to Justin's point about training. In addition to whatever EPD does, the City of Eugene, all employees, including EPD, both sworn staff and others, are in the process of going through what we call the belonging training, which is an initial 6 hours that helps people to understand bias, how identity operates and functions, and how structural forms of exclusion operate in our society more broadly, to give them a sense of the understanding of how power and privilege can affect their understanding, perception, and judgment. That's something that's in the process of being rolled out across the organization at the moment. And in addition to the 6 hours that every single City of Eugene employee is getting, supervisors are also getting, I believe, an additional 4 hours. So that is also something in addition to whatever EPD does that we're in the process of rolling out to help people understand exclusion and bias and the role that power and perception play in making their judgments in how to be good public servants.
Thank you. Midas?
All right, so my next question directly relates back to Marty's. I'm just wondering, in terms of the hiring process, they talk about, we do the background checks. What criminal and or driving history would actually exclude someone from being considered as an applicant? And is there anywhere that we can, is there a document, is there a list somewhere that we could get of these things across the board, no matter what, you cannot apply if you have this on your record? And then maybe if there's even wiggle room stuff that exists, just for us moving forward in terms of providing recommendations to the city council, it would be nice to know what we're already working with, what is already a red flag for you guys. I don't want to take up a lot of time right now with that, but if there is some way we could get some sort of document or some sort of, just some sort of document that explains what is a direct deterrent from being considered for application. But then a question I have that can be answered now is, I know you have specialty crisis intervention training, and I was wondering who teaches that. Is that outsourced out to another company, or is that done through someone in the city?
over the years, it's been done various ways. We've had a psychologist teach it before. We've had officers who go to training for that teach it. It's really varied.
So you don't outsource it out to a different company. It's just different every time.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And then this was with the special intervention training. I seemed to get the idea that it was optional. You said that only 60 to 70% of officers have attended it. I was wondering why you think that number is so low, or is it a time thing? Is it they haven't gotten to it yet, but they will? Is it just, they just aren't going to?
Yeah, it's not necessarily that it's optional, because the chief has given us direction that he wants every officer to attend it. Mm-hmm. However, because it's a 40-hour-a-week class or 40-hour class, we do it with the sheriff's office and Springfield Police. We can only do so many a year. And so we've been trying to do 2 or 3 classes a year. And in the last couple years, we've hired a lot. So it's just a matter of getting people run through it. Our last class was in March, right when COVID started hitting. So we had to cancel our October and December classes. So part of it is just we haven't had the opportunity to get everybody through it because we've hired so many people. But the chief does not consider it optional.
All right. And then final question on terms of the psych eval. I saw that there was only a 45 to 60-minute interview, which with the therapist. Now, is that due to budget constraints, or is that just kind of the agreed upon all it should take?
So I'll start again high level, and then I'm going to hand it over to Stacy to sort of go over the framework of what that evaluation process looks like, probably without going into significant detail. But I'll just again, and I take Marty's point very well, that just because it's a national standard may not be the way we want to keep it. But I will just reemphasize it is a standard that's consistent across the country. And Stacy, if you want to provide sort of a high-level summary of how that process goes, it would be appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. So the actual testing for the psychological evaluation is pretty in-depth. It's a 4 to 6 hour completion of answering different questions, different scantrons. There is, to help answer Marty's question, there is a behavioral section that helps identify certain patterns in people's, it helps identify certain patterns with people. The whole process of the psych, the interview is really to review the results of the paperwork itself. So typically, only 45 minutes to an hour is needed. However, our psychologist would extend that if more information is needed from the candidate, or if something came up in the results that they needed to discuss further.
Got it. And I'm sure this might be classified information, but with my previous question, it would be nice to get some sort of what they are looking for, what they're screening for, especially with the face-to-face. I mean, anyone can say anything on a test in 4 to 5 hours. You can put down whatever people want to hear. So it would just be nice to know what exactly is being screened for. And no further questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Jason. We can't hear you.
Jason, you might have to log off and log back on. And while you do that, we can move on to the next person and come back to you.
Okay. Macy?
Hello. This question is around hiring and recruiting. In the video, the phrases destination police force and culture of department were used. Could you please clarify what those terms mean? Thank you.
Yeah, culture of the police department is what our values and our work culture, what our beliefs are, what our values are. And then destination department is basically a place that everybody wants to work. So it's kind of, I'll make it like Google. If you're a computer programmer, Google might be the greatest place to work. And we want EPD to be a great place that everybody wants to work.
A follow-up question. Could you clarify what it means to be a place where everyone wants to work? Because I know that there has been difficulty hiring people of color, and so I'm curious to know, how do you tie that into working at the police force?
Well, we do several things with our recruiting officer to try and have a larger field of applicants. And the city has a long tradition of hiring a diverse workforce. In my recruit class 24 years ago, there were 13 of us. There were 5 people of color and 2 women. So we do make a concerted effort to try and hire a diverse workforce, and the chief is committed to that very much so.
Anyone have anything to add? Okay, I'm gonna circle back to Jason. If you want to try again. Oh my gosh, I cannot hear you. Can you call in? I had to call.
Does this work?
Oh, that totally works.
Yay. All right. Thank you for being patient with me. I guess my line of questioning is still along the lines, particularly for ERC employees. Do we know which job classifications that in EPD, particularly are Black and Indigenous people of color underutilized?
Jason, we do have data that is somewhat, I'll say, wanting, because the questions that we ask at the time of recruitment are not as holistic as a person who may be indicating their identity would like them to be, frankly. And so federally, we have to provide reports for equal employment. And you're shaking your head, so you're probably familiar with that. Those federal reporting requirements do not always align, not always. Those federal reporting requirements do not align necessarily with a person's individual identity. And so for that reason, while we can provide some reporting on identity, it would be, in my opinion, insufficient and not fully reflective of our workforce.
I understand. This is about self-identification. So according to your own affirmative action data, which job classifications are underutilized for EPD?
So I don't have that data readily available. I would be happy to look into that and provide the information to this group at a later time, unless anyone else, either Nicole or Sandy has that, or Stacy has that readily available.
And my follow-up question is, how does the city measure adverse impact at each stage of the recruitment or hiring process? Is that data tracked at each phase? I know NeoGov is able to do that. And then my final question is, what percentage of BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, people of color actually make it from recruitment through trial or probation? That would be really helpful data.
So Jason, I want to make sure I got all of your questions. One of your questions is related to classification for underrepresented groups, including Indigenous people. What classifications specifically within EPD are those? The
Are
second
underutilized
question.
in accordance with
Underutilized.
your affirmative action plan. Yes, I could look that up if it's online. And then adverse impact at each stage of your hiring recruitment process. So for example, is there an adverse impact on BIPOC applicants compared to white applicants? What breakdown around that? And then, screening, interview, reference checks, and then your probationary period. How many? What's the ratio at each one of those steps?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. My camera got turned off because I don't have good internet. Apologies. Justin?
Yeah, just a couple more questions. How effective has removing information from during recruiting, how has that brought more people from unrepresented groups into the organization? So by not asking questions of race, gender, ethnicity, those kinds of things. One of my concerns with that is by doing that, whoever is viewing those applications, those documents, now we're leaving the opportunity for them to view those based on name and address through implicit bias because of the information that is on there. And has that been effective for you guys to bring underrepresented groups into the police department by not asking those questions?
Well, I can get us started, and then I'd invite Lieutenant Tenseth as well as Nicole and Stacy to weigh in. Unfortunately, Justin, the removal of names has been a somewhat recent development for our organization, and we have not had a long history of tracking these kinds of impacts across the organization. And so I don't have readily available data to compare where we are today to where we are 5 years ago, where we were 5 years ago. And so any information I would be able to give you would be unfortunately anecdotal. I can say it's certainly best practice at this time to remove the name and identifiable information with the intention of removing, of course, the impact of implicit bias. And so I'm hopeful that it will have that impact. And I'm totally transparent that unfortunately we don't have a longstanding history of removing that information in a way that could provide comparative data analytics. And so I'm happy to turn it over to Nicole or to Stacy to talk about any trends we've seen since we have made that change. And of course, Lieutenant Tenseth might have additional thoughts as well.
Thanks, Randy. I don't like you stated, it's very early on, so we are just starting that out. So the measure, we haven't been able to measure quite that yet. We are tracking it right now, so we just don't have quite that information just yet.
Okay, thank you. And then one more question. You guys have a list. There was a list provided in the video about things that are not used to discriminate applicants. Why is economic status not included on that list? Do you think it should be because of the racial wealth gap in this country?
Well, Justin, I'll again just offer, I'm not going to share with you my personal opinion. I can say that there is a wealth gap, and I don't disagree with your characterization. My interest is in trying to find ways to make the police department and our recruitment process a more equitable process. And if that's a way that we could do that, I'm certainly open to exploring that idea.
Thank you.
All right, I've got Lindsay and then Erica, then Leah, and then Daniel. So Lindsay. I can't hear you. Hey, Lindsay. I can't, I'm, at least I cannot hear you.
I cannot hear you either. Lindsay, you might need to unplug and plug in your headphones.
Mm-mm.
Or log off and back on.
You're also muted, Lindsay. You've got the little red mute.
Okay, now try again.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Erica?
Hey, so I was listening to the different answers regarding the screens that the recruits go through. So, you know, I kind of like worry some because so far I have not listened any, any real answers because, like, for example, I would be interested if the recruits are the people that are in those trainings, if they had been screened for domestic violence or sexual assault abuse, because, locally, nationally, regionally, we have issues in cases where, police officers have sexually assaulted civilians. So what are the qualifications of how do the trainings can identify or can like screen this kind of behavior? Because, this is a big one, right? Especially because there is statistics already that show that a lot of people that are involved within the police department also have issues or domestic violence at home. So how do the Eugene Police Department is addressing this issue when they are going to train this or hire these people?
I guess I'll speak to that first, I guess. So generally in the hiring process, if someone has an arrest or a conviction for domestic violence, even if it's not a conviction, if it's just an arrest, they would likely not get hired unless there were some extenuating circumstances. In the state of Oregon, if you're convicted of domestic abuse, you can no longer carry a firearm. So we cannot employ anyone who's been convicted of domestic abuse. So in the hiring process, those types of behaviors would weed someone out pretty quickly. As far as in training, when someone goes out on the street and they begin working, it's kind of up to sergeants and lieutenants, supervisors to monitor behavior and make sure, at least behavior when they're around is acceptable. It's the supervisor's job to know where their officers are throughout the shift, what they're doing. It's the supervisor's job to review body-worn camera footage of various incidents. So I don't know that it's something you can necessarily train someone out of, but I would think that when in the hiring process, if those factors are known, they would not be hired.
I have a following question regarding the same. So how does qualified immunity could difficult the hiring process for people that had been serving in other states or in other places, and they have been serving and have this qualified immunity that protects them wherever they go in other states? How can you guys, or how this will difficult your hiring process if you are not being released all the information?
So I think I understand your question. So when someone has applied to become an officer and we do their background investigation, we would find out the other states they've lived in, and we would run a records check in those states as well as contacting the certifying agency in those states. I'm not sure if that was your question or not.
In other meetings, we have talked about how, in Lane County, some officers, like in Lane County, EPD and Springfield Police Department, they benefit from qualified immunity. So we know that this is happening here. So if this is happening in here, this happens in other places. So we know that if some other police officer that had been in service and something happened, they decide to move, and they already have something that had happened, but that is not open to the public because they have this immunity. So how do this qualified immunity would block all the efforts your team is doing to try to hire high quality recruits, but you yourselves are not having all the information? So that is like, I'm asking you, how do you think this qualified immunity is counterproductive to these very honest and loving kind of desires of hiring members of our community to protect us?
So first of all, qualified immunity, I don't think is what you're thinking it is. And maybe Brian Michaels can jump in here because he's an attorney and explain a little bit what qualified immunity is. But qualified immunity is something that protects the officer from liability if they're on the job acting as a police officer and they're not acting outside of the bounds. Qualified immunity doesn't prevent if someone does something illegal in another state, it does not prevent that information being released to us. So Brian, I don't know.
But they can still keep working in their job, even though they have shown that they, like, for example, the person that killed Floyd, he have killed indigenous persons before. So if there is all these precedents that are not being visible for everybody, so how we can not keep hiring people that have issues of sexual abuse, of bias, and like violence and all this kind of stuff? How can we hire people?
Hi, Erica, sorry to break in, 30 seconds.
So just that's my question. How can we do a good job if we're not having all the truth?
I think we do the best we can is trying to find out all of their history before we arrest them or before we hire them, so that we don't hire them. And then we monitor them as they're working to make sure, they're not doing anything illegal after they've been hired.
Yeah, I would say our background, very comprehensive background process is key. We do go check all those prior agencies. If the person had been a police officer in another state, we talk to neighbors, we talk to friends, we talk to relatives, employers. So it's very comprehensive, followed up with the very comprehensive psychological. And then we have several meetings with our staff throughout the course of the recruitment. Then if a person is hired, they go through a very extensive training process. And during that first 18 months, if they aren't right for us, we'll make a change.
All right, thank you. I've got 4 people. I'm going to try really hard to get us done with this by 7:10 because I'd like to add 10 more minutes to our motions discussion. We're going to let Lindsay try again. I hear her microphone's fixed.
Let's try now. Can you hear me now, everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, I'm hoping to learn a little bit more about the ongoing evaluation process, and so evaluation, coaching, training process for officers after they're released from their probationary period. So I'm wondering what that process is, what the frequency of evaluations are, what are the metrics of success? So I'm not as interested in the initial part. There's actually quite a lot of documentation, and I can find a lot in the just publicly available information. It's after officers have become sort of regular officers. They're not in probation anymore.
So once they're no longer on probation, it becomes their sergeant and their lieutenant's job to supervise them. They approve all their reports, they review their body camera footage, those type of things. If complaints come in, they're handled through the auditor's office, and then any discipline or corrective action is handled by the supervisor. The supervisor should be doing annual evaluations on every employee, identifying their strengths and weaknesses, as well as career development goals, those types of things. So it really falls on the sergeant in charge of the particular officer.
And so who is responsible then for like reviewing those annual personnel reviews, or developing metrics of success or career development goals and those types of things?
The lieutenant. So the sergeant would complete them, then the lieutenant would review them. But it would be done with the employee as far as goals.
And then does EPD use analytics in such a way? So for example, I guess, what are your metrics of success for an officer that you think is doing a great job?
I guess the metrics for success are they're not receiving any complaints. When the supervisors and other officers are on calls with them, they see them acting professionally. They do thorough investigations. They handle their evidence properly. They get along well with their coworkers. You know, all the typical things that you would want a good employee to do. And I think maybe what you're asking is if we look at statistics and stuff like that, I think some supervisors do look at, you know, like how active the officers are, if they're following up on a lot of crimes, if they're making a lot of arrests. Those things are looked at too, but there's no quotas or any mandatory stuff like that.
I don't think I'm as interested in quotas so much as if it seems difficult to systematically sort of evaluate successful officers if there aren't department-wide agreed upon metrics for what success looks like. And then it would be very difficult to use analytics, for example, to evaluate those things. So for example, I, as a community member, anyone who's ever heard me talk, and you have heard me talk a lot, beat on the drum of de-escalation. If de-escalation isn't a metric of success, it's already a tricky thing to measure, but it does create at least holes in the data. And there are ways I think we could get at systematically evaluating the people who are awesome at de-escalation, because I've seen people be awesome at de-escalation. I review lots of video because I get to, and I've seen officers who are great at it, and I've seen officers who are not good at it, and I've seen officers who straight up escalate, right? And so those are the kinds of things I'm kind of like trying to dig at, is to figure out like sort of what are the metrics of success. So for example, arrest rates are super easy to measure, but I don't know if that equals, if arrest rate equals public safety equals metric of success. So I'm just trying to like poke a little bit to find out from y'all, because you're the
professionals who know what you're doing, what you consider metrics of success and how you measure that and how you systematize that kind of across the organization in terms of personnel management. And because of course, I would hope that people who meet those metrics of success.
Hi,
then
Lindsay, sorry, 30 seconds.
Sure, then become the people who are promoted and chosen for particular roles based on those types of things.
So I guess I would say the metrics, are, like you said, are difficult to gauge. I think a lot of times we use our internal affairs system if we have an officer that's getting a lot of complaints and there's red flags there. If there's, because we review all use of force incidents. So when we review use of force incidents, if we see escalation as opposed to de-escalation, we deal with it in that process. And if we have an officer, quite frankly, who has a couple sustained complaints or even one sustained complaint for failing to de-escalate, those are things that the employee could be disciplined for. They could not be eligible for promotion because of that. So some of that is done in the internal affairs process, and a lot of it's simply done by the supervisor monitoring the employee. You know, everyone in the department knows, you know, there's officers who could, you know, are really great de-escalators, and, you know, there's officers that need improvement, and it's up to the supervisors to identify those so we can train them.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got Leah, Daniel, Justin, Marvin, and then Counselor Evans. So Leah?
Yeah, the first question I have, I really appreciated sort of seeing the slides about training, and as I'm listening, I'm realizing we're not really getting the full picture of what training officers go through. So I'm wondering if we could get a clearer picture of that. Maybe that's something that could be sent to us with a clearer picture of the training, sort of with the training that seems that it's not set, that you're figuring out as you go along. What's the criteria for adding training? And then if there's any information about how participants are evaluated after that training occurs. All of that would be really helpful, because I think that the slides didn't give the complete picture. So both the required sort of training, but also the additional training that it sounds like happens in terms of staff development and all of those sort of things. And then the other question I had was really about recruitment. I was a little bit confused, and I wonder if I could get clarification about, is the EPD just in constant recruitment mode? Are you just constantly recruiting? Or, because I heard on one hand that you were fully staffed, and on the other hand that it sounded like there was a continuous recruitment process. And I'm just sort of wondering about some questions about turnover and about that whole process, if that could be clarified.
Lieutenant Tenza, do you want to take that one?
Sure. We have a full-time recruiter, and we are building brand recognition, which is very near to Chief Skinner's heart. And so we are constantly doing that. We're engaging with a lot of different groups, a lot of different organizations. Right now, we're fully staffed, or maybe one under. We always kind of fluctuate in that +1, -1 area. But as far as you know, a continuous process, we are currently have an open process for laterals. So that's actually the only source that we're hiring right now is laterals, because we can bring 1 or 2 on at a time instead of a large class. We are always forward thinking though, like I shared in the presentation, our analytics, what we anticipate our needs to be. And so we're always kind of keeping an eye on that also. And as CSI comes up, based on the number of positions and our ability to train staff, we'll be well prepared or well positioned to make that happen also.
Okay, Daniel.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. My question was going to be on promotion process, but I think a lot of it was covered under Lindsay's question, so I'll take it in a slightly different tack. Is there anything currently being done or any way that as part of their evaluation or promotion process to encourage or reward EPD employees for engaging in the community, either through participation in nonprofits, especially with marginalized groups. It seems to me that the more that our officers feel like they are a part of the community and invested in the community, that they would care more about protecting the members of the community rather than an us-them kind of mentality. I'll take an answer from anyone.
So I actually think either Lieutenant San Miguel or Lieutenant Tinseth are probably best situated to answer this question from the department perspective.
For Daniel, is it you want to talk all about promotion process only?
Well, no, I mean, because the promotion process is tied in with the evaluation process. But I mean, for example, I work at the university, and in part of our promotion process, one of the things that they look at is our participation in diversity, equity, inclusion programs and organizations on campus and to activities on campus. Is there something similar that could be done in the community, whether it's volunteering for Food for Lane County or any number of organizations to build and develop that connection and feeling of being a stakeholder in the community beyond their duties?
Well, our officers and our civilian staff or professional staff live in the community. We own houses, we have kids, we're engaged in school activities, and it's up to each individual. I mean, we just delivered 50 food boxes to veterans and people in need on Thanksgiving. So it is largely what speaks to the person's heart that's engaging in the activities that are important to them as they live their lives. But as far as when we go to promotions, we look at a body of work. You know, what have you done in your career as a police officer, and how has it prepared you for advancement? So we look at it in totality.
Okay. I have 4 more people, and I'm going to really hold us to this 7:20. We did not get our 10 minutes. Justin.
Yeah, Randy, I was just hoping to get some clarification in regards to economic status not affecting those who are hired, specifically those in the minority community, and what's being done to make sure that that's not something that is disqualifying people based on their economic status, or the situation that they may have been born into and are trying to get away from.
So I'm not sure I quite understand your question, Justin. I agree with you that because of historic racism, there are financial and economic impacts to underrepresented groups and in particular to Black people in America. I guess I'm wondering if you mean in the state of Oregon, protected classes, or what exactly are you wondering about?
Sure. So I know oftentimes a credit check is something that is done. And I know of people who have been disqualified merely because of their financial position. And that wasn't due to any irresponsibility on those individuals' part, but because of the situation that they're coming from, they have been disqualified and seen as irresponsible by those who are doing background investigations on them and questioned in a very demeaning manner because of that. What's being done to make sure that that isn't happening, so that we're not getting a police force that are all coming from the same economic background.
Yeah, I take that point. I think that, as I mentioned with the removal of names, for example, ideally we would have undertaken some of these actions a long time ago. I'll also say we have a long way to go in terms of the ERC's role with regard to advancing an accessible and equitable workplace. We still have work to do. This is an area that I think we have some opportunity, at least organizationally, to learn from. In terms of what our current practices are, I will hand it over to Stacy to talk a little bit about what our practices are currently. And again, Justin, I would just emphasize to you that this is an ongoing process that we're deeply committed to. And so I appreciate the question and the way you asked it.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
All right, Marvin.
Mo, I did have one more question if there's time.
Oh, you gotta be real quick. We have 7 minutes.
Yeah. So if the desire is to bring in a more diverse group of people onto the police force, we can look in the country and see that a lot of minority communities, those underrepresented, have been harmed and damaged from the police. What is being done, if any, restoration for those communities? And then is there contact with leaders within those communities to bring those marginalized groups into the police force? Or provide an avenue where individuals in those communities would feel comfortable applying for law enforcement positions?
Lieutenant Tenseth, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, our background, or our recruitment officer is working on things like that right now. And sorry, I hit a button. And anyway, yeah, our recruitment officer is making inroads in trying to get a more diverse pool of applicants. And that's a continuing process. Every time we do a recruitment, or every time we do a different process, we're always in a phase of continual improvement. So we all get together and look for ways to get better at what we do. When we have an unsuccessful hire, meaning they wash out in training or whatever the situation is, we're going back and we're looking at backgrounds. We're looking at our training process. We're looking at our hiring process. And we're always trying to raise the bar and always trying to get better.
Sure. So would you mind elaborating on details of things that are being done? And then that recruitment team and those who are doing recruiting, what is the
Justin, sorry, 30 seconds, please.
You can finish asking your question, Justin.
So those who are doing recruitment, what is the demographic of those? Are they Black, white, Hispanic? Are they men, women? And then what are some specific things that are being done to bring in marginalized groups during that recruiting process?
We have a variety of people on our recruitment team. I think we just added a few more. We've had one that promoted off. And it's a mixture of our department, some women, some people of color. And as far as specifics for what they're doing, Kara has gone to women's fairs, career fairs, half marathons. A lot of what she's doing right now, because we're not ramped up fully with hiring, is getting brand recognition. So we're doing a lot of stuff on social media, etc. And that's what she does.
Thank you.
Marvin?
Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Marvin Revolve, and over 30 years ago, I was the recruitment officer for the city of Eugene. I think it's important for many of you to look at the screens, and if you want to know what the difficulty is on hiring people of color, take a look at your screen. It was very difficult, and it is very difficult when you're in a competitive situation, and that's exactly what EPD is a competitive situation to hire the most qualified, including those people of color that are out there. I can tell you point blank that I was turned down multiple times in multiple cities and multiple churches and multiple community activities. And I was also the president of the NAACP at the time, because people of color didn't feel welcome by the community in the city of Eugene. So it's great I'm happy to see that many of you are now looking at the issue on the country as a whole, taking a look at what's going on now. But I can tell you what the two lieutenants are telling you is that they're in a competitive situation to hire the very best people possible to do the job, to represent the community. And during the Rodney King incident, people asked about you and them. We didn't have a riot at the time because the police officers in this town and in Springfield and in Lane County live in the community. That's not the case in San Francisco, LA, Portland, Seattle, because they can't afford to live in the town. So I'm not coming to the defense. Angie knew me back in the day, and I had my issues with the department on a regular basis, but I had a bigger issue with the community. So what you're looking at is a situation where, as a community, understanding or trying to understand what it takes to be a police officer, especially a Black police officer or a Native American police officer in a white community where people are trying to take your badge off your chest because they don't think you should be one. It is an ongoing process. So I would ask that as this committee, step back. Not everything you hear that's going on in LA or Detroit or St. Louis goes on here. I know it's difficult to say, I'm a trusted cop. Believe me, I've been stopped by the cops too, as has Rick Hamilton.
Marvin, sorry, 30 seconds.
So, it is, before you say, I don't trust you, step back a little bit. You might find a different view.
I think that is an example of holding two things at once, right? So yeah, they might find a different view and their experiences are real. Everyone around this table has had whatever experiences they've had, their family has too. So I think it's a yes and situation. Friends, it is 7:20. We have 3 motions to talk about. So I'm gonna go through, there are 3 people with their hands up. I'm gonna ask you to be really fast, no follow-up questions. I see Marty shaking his head. we're gonna, and Councilor Evans, I see that you have your hand up, but we agreed that community members would have priority, and we are out of time for this. I don't think okay, so I'm gonna move on to Jason.
Just really quickly, I noticed that the last at least publicly available department equity plan for PD was 2009. I was wondering if that was updated, and the last affirmative action seems to be from 14 to 17, 2017. Is there an update of those? And that's to anyone who knows about it.
It looks like something we need to find out and bring back to the group.
I was going to say, we're getting a little bit of a facilitator role here too. So I would say that may be something.
Randy, your sound is static.
Robotic. Super jumbled. Yeah. Okay, Erica, you're our last question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, you know, because we are talking about the community, we're talking about how to make our community safe or welcoming, but you know, like when I'm listening to the specialists talk, they are talking about a brand, and they are talking about brand, like a brand, you know, like a marketing brand, like the police department is a brand. So then that worries me, because as a citizen, I don't see myself as a brand. I don't see myself as rooting for a brand. I see more like trying to find the right people to protect our community and to serve our community, because that is like the main idea, right? But so far, I'm not seeing that. What I'm seeing, people worrying about a brand as something that is created to specifically promote something. So I just, you know, I have a, you know, I know what this marketing is. So I just worry because, you know, like today it was just listening, like talking about Nike or talking about Samsung or talking about any other brand. You know, I didn't hear a group of people that came to talk about a community that is important, and how can we, you know, and what are all the things that we're doing to provide that? Because, you know, like the things that matter the most to people that we are in this table is like, what are we doing as a community to be sure that the people that we're bringing in here are going to be respectful with people that are from different cultures, that are from different genders, that are from like different, you know, like what kind of people are we bringing home, right? So, but I just would highly recommend for the specialists to evaluate that, because, you know, we're not talking about with customers, and we are not trying to sell something. We are trying to build community. Thank you.
Thank you. I am going to move us along to item number 4 on the agenda. So thank you all so much for coming to answer all of these questions. We have a long list of things that we said we would ask you for follow-up for, so we'll be in touch for that. And feel free to stay if you would like, and if you have things that you need to do, you are free to go. So item number 4 on the agenda is considering previously submitted motions from the Community Oversight Committee. Motion number 1 and motion number 4 are going to be held until that committee meets again. So they're listed so we don't lose them or lose track of them, but we're not going to talk about them today. So I'm going to start with motion number 2, which is a motion on drug testing officers after a violent incident. So the motion that is being forwarded to you all to consider, it reads, Officers should be drug tested at the close of the event for any use of force incident that results in serious injury or death.
Bye.
So I would entertain a motion.
I second motion that. What's our motion?
Thank you, Erica. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Brian. Any discussion?
Well, I would note that all 5 members of the subcommittee voted for this, redundantly to say unanimously. And, you know, the reason is, you know, at least part of the reason is, in terms of whether or not down the line, this officer is going to be subject to an investigation because of any potential wrongdoing from a complainant, whether or not he was under the influence of drugs of any kind, will be a serious factor in evaluating that complaint during that investigation. And the only way to know that is to have that drug test done at the time of the incident in question. Part of that motion should have read, if there is no complaint, then the test will be disposed of and not retained, so that he or she does not have to worry about something hanging out.
Okay.
Fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? So we're going to do a roll call vote. I know that you have all missed that. Oh, Lindsay is waving her hand. So, Lindsay.
I see Rick Rosetta's hand up in the.
Oh, Rick.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
I think it's already the case that if there's any suspicion on the part of any of the officers on the scene at the time of the incident, that's something that is done. I go to the 3 things that Kevin outlined at the beginning of the meeting today, which were regarding what our purposes are here in being here. And one of actually the first one is, what is the problem we're trying to fix? I don't think there's been any evidence of any situation yet where this is a problem. If it's something that the officer wants to do in order to protect himself or herself, then they could have the opportunity to do that if they wanted to. I don't see that it's our role to be involved in requiring it at this time.
Okay. Sandra? Did you put your hand down, Sandra? Sorry.
Hang on. No, I put her hand down. I thought she was about to speak.
Oh, okay. Did you have something to add, Sandra?
No.
Okay. Silver, did you have? I saw your hand go up and then down. Okay, we're gonna do a roll call vote, friends. We got 3 of these to get through in 10 minutes. Ems.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Daniel?
Yes.
Betsy?
Yes.
Macy?
Yes.
Dee?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
Abdul Rahman?
Yes.
Lindsay?
I would like to abstain.
Okay. Ebe?
Yes.
Thank you. Rick Hamilton? Can't hear you, Rick.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, with explanation.
Okay.
And that it's just if it'll add some transparency to it, I say yes, because even if there's something medical on board, there's probably a reason for it. So I'd say yes. I guess if I was in that situation, I'd take a drug test.
Thank you. I don't see Joel's name on our list of participants. Erica?
Yes.
Thank you. Jason?
Yeah, exception of medical privacy around ADA.
Okay. Justin?
Yeah.
Brian?
Yes.
Silver?
Yes.
Tana? Are you here, Tana? Okay. Guadalupe?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
I don't see Alai on the list of folks that are here. And I didn't see Quentin either. Rick Rosetta?
No.
David?
Yes.
Is Leticia on?
Yes, I am, and I vote yes.
Awesome, thank you. Sandra?
Yes.
Thank you. I did not see David Tam. Midas
Yes.
and Marty.
Yes.
All right. That's 21 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstention. So the motion carries. Good job, team. The next one that is coming before you is a motion on spoliation. And this one reads, if a body-worn camera recording is recklessly, intentionally, or negligently destroyed or unavailable, officer testimony on the events contained in the recording should not be admissible. So I would entertain a motion on that. Lindsay, are you moving to?
I just have a question about, I don't understand something about the motion.
Okay, go ahead.
So can I ask a clarifying question to the committee? It says officer testimony, but officer testimony where? Like in a court, like in an interview describing.
Good question. We wouldn't have any authority about his testimony anywhere other than during an investigation into his conduct by this, in our view, by the CRB.
Okay, so you mean the officer testimony, meaning you mean that the officer wouldn't be allowed to be interviewed by internal affairs?
No, only during whoever conducts the investigation. It is mine and some other people's idea that the CRB will be conducting the investigation into a complaint about his or her conduct. So if the CRB,
so whoever conducts the investigation would not receive any testimony at all from the officer?
which would be different than an interview with internal affairs.
And can you explain to me how that would be different?
Well, in our view, the investigation will be conducted by the CRB. Because we have this model that we think we want to have occurred, similar to the subpoena power that we're going to discuss more fully later, but in the event that CRB does in fact become the investigative power, and those investigations are conducted under the matrix that was part of Daniel's proposal, then that officer whose conduct is subject to the investigation, if that officer should have in some way have negligently, recklessly, or deliberately not had his or her body cam on and working, then that officer has forfeited that right to present testimony to the CRB investigation. It's under this. Go
So
ahead.
do I understand correctly then that this motion sort of rests upon a proposal for a completely different structure for civilian oversight? Because at this moment, what it would mean in our current structure, barring some other changes, which I'm happy to hear more about, what this motion would mean is that IA, you're saying that IA wouldn't receive testimony from an officer because internal affairs under the supervision of the auditor's office is who currently does that investigation.
Rest is a word that can carry a couple of three different meanings. In reality, as it plays out in the field, the logistics are only the Citizens Review Board would be affected by this motion, no matter what we say or do. IA is going to do what they do. And I don't think they're going to listen to this motion. So I don't think that's a reality in terms of how this will play out in the real world and how things are done. It's only a reality if citizens. I'm sorry.
This is a 30-second time check.
Okay. It is only a reality in the event that an independent citizen review or external review conducts the investigation.
So to me, then this motion feels like cart before the horse. Like if this rests upon change in the civilian oversight process, then it seems like we should consider this at a later time. And I guess my final comment in my last 2 seconds is just that if the problem we're trying to solve is officers not turning off body cameras, then perhaps we could consider an alternate mechanism for achieving that goal. And that's all.
I'm not sure what that alternate mechanism could be if it's not conducted by the Civilian Review Board.
Brian, I'm going to move us along. I see Daniel has his hand up.
Yeah, just two things. One, that that if the video for whatever reason is spoiled, that the officer may testify on the incident but not on the events that didn't get caught on the camera because of that being spoiled. That's my understanding of this. I do agree with you, Lindsay, that this is a bit of the cart before the horse, and perhaps this should be tabled along with the other two, pending further discussion by the subcommittee.
I would happily entertain a motion, either voting on the motion that is before you or to table it.
Then I move to table this motion along with the other two.
Second.
Who just seconded it?
Rick.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Any discussion? We're gonna do another vote and start at the bottom.
I have a part of a discussion. We already voted on the first one, so that one shouldn't be included in this as part of we're tabling this motion. That motion is passed. So the only consideration Daniel could have is this motion and the next one.
I meant the other two motions from the last meeting that were tabled. That's what I meant, Silver.
Okay.
Okay, Mo, can you please help me? I'm a little confused with the term tabling.
Yeah, it just means that we're like setting it aside until there's more information, and the motion can either be, it can be made in a more clear way, or it can maybe be changed a little bit. And so the group on community oversight will meet outside of this meeting in another public meeting and come back to you all with what they think is better. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, table it.
All right, I'm going to start at the bottom for our vote to table it. So Marty.
Yes.
Okay, Midas. Can't hear
Yes.
you. Thank you. Sandra?
Yes.
Thank you. Leticia?
Yes.
Thank you. David?
Yes.
Rick Rosetta?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
Guadalupe?
Yes.
Silver?
Yes.
Thanks. Brian?
Yes.
Thank you. Justin?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Erica?
Yes.
Thanks. Rick Hamilton?
Yes.
Eve?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Abdul Rahman?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
Dee?
Yes.
Macy?
Yes.
Betsy?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
And Ems?
Yes.
All right, friends, that everybody voted yes, so the motion passes unanimously. Time check. We have one more motion to chat about and a couple more things that are super important. So I'm wondering, I feel like I'm a broken record asking you all for 10 more minutes of your time, but I wonder if I can have 10 more minutes of your time.
I will say that because I was able to get the information out to committee members regarding the next agenda item, payment, I don't think we need to touch on that. Everybody's had the email. You should have received a W-9. If you have any questions, queries, etc., I know a couple of people have already come back to me on that. Please just email me and we can sort that out. And I don't want to take any more of the committee's valuable time dealing with that issue. So if everyone's okay with that, then we'll do this motion and then move on to the next item.
If I might say, this motion we're about to discuss will probably fall into the same category as the previous one, and better left tabled for discussion within the subcommittee. That would be my motion.
All right, well, let me read it and we'll see if you have a second. The last one that we are going to chat about is a motion on reviewing civilian oversight structures. And it says, recommend that the City Council engage community in evaluating the existing form and structure of civilian oversight and defining the appropriate system for this community. So I would entertain either a motion to vote on that or a motion to table it.
Can the person who wrote it clarify, please?
Yeah. So, looking at the 21st Century Policing Final Report, the recommendation in there is that every community should define the form and structure of a civilian oversight to meet the needs of that community. And given what's happened, especially over the last 8 months, and the kind of underscoring of just the rupture of trust between police and communities, I think that it's, you know, what we're doing here is important, but it requires a look at a higher level, and that is the actual structure that we have. Obviously, needs are not being met, and that requires that the people whose needs are not being met actually get voice in how that, you know, first of all, we don't know if the existing structure is actually working. I would imagine that if we did evaluate complaints, you know, we would find that there's a lot of problems with the existing structures. And so trying to figure out, is it working for us? Is it not? And if it's not, especially for people who feel it's not, have them be engaged and, you know, have them be engaged and put forth a recommendation. I don't know if it's something that is like a, you know, an analysis of public safety and civilian oversight. I think it just needs to be analyzed. We can't assume that the structures work. I'm not going to make that assumption. So I think that needs to be re-examined.
Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll second Brian's motion to table it.
Okay, any discussion? All right, we will vote. And I'll start at the top. Ems.
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Betsy?
Yes.
Macy?
Yes.
Dee?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
Abdul Rahman?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Ebe?
Yes.
Rick Hamilton?
Yes.
Erica?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Justin? Justin?
Yes.
Thanks. Brian?
Yes.
Silver?
Yes.
Guadalupe?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
Rick Rosetta?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Leticia?
Yes.
Sandra?
Yes.
Midas?
Yes.
And Marty?
Yes.
You have voted unanimously to table this. Thank you. Did anyone have any comments about the payment, or did what Kaz say make good sense to you? Okay. So the next item is to consider filling vacancies on the hiring and training and body-worn camera subcommittees. So my question to you all There's one more space. Actually, is this me or is this? Not this me. There's one more space on the hiring and training subcommittee. Is there anyone else who is interested in serving with Midas, Alai, Justin, Dee, Leah, and Sandra?
This is Jason. I'll do it.
Thank you. Anyone else or? Okay. And there are two folks on the body worn camera subcommittee. So right now it's Ems and Joel. So wondering if we could have up to 5 more on that committee. Is there anyone else who would like to join that committee?
I would like to. Sandra?
Does this mean that we wouldn't be limited to just one subcommittee?
If we've been around all of the other opportunities, then the motion that was passed says yes, you can serve on another committee if it's been offered around to everybody else and there are still vacancies.
I'd like to be on this one.
Okay.
I would like to be in this one too.
Who was the second person there? I missed it.
Erica?
Silva and Erica.
Silver. Okay, thank you.
And Sandra?
And
Sandra, yes.
And Sandra. And Abdul Rahman, are you volunteering?
Yes, if it's still available, one seat can be there.
Okay. Thank you. I got one more space if anyone is just really wanting to be on that committee.
I will.
Okay, I see also Tana would like to be on it.
Mo, maybe we've got some slightly out of kilter counts here because I'm counting Ems, Joel, Silverio, Erica, Sandra, and Abdul Rahman and on the body worn committee, and Jason on the other one, on the hiring and training subcommittees, which I think gives us the full amount. So if any of the people who've just volunteered themselves have not served on a subcommittee, they would have precedence over those who have put themselves forward twice. So I think Torna Nelson hasn't served before.
And Macy.
And Macy. No, Macy's on the use of force.
Okay.
So I think it's just
Is
Torna.
there any?
Tana's in the chat.
Okay.
Tana is in the chat asking to be on the training subcommittee.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the folks who are serving on other ones, are any of you willing to?
Sorry, Mo, just to cut across you again, I do apologize. Jason, who hadn't put himself forward for a previous subcommittee, has taken the slot on the hiring and training subcommittee, which means that there is no duplication on that committee. There's nobody who's put themselves forward for another committee, which in turn means that that committee is full. So Torna, I'm sorry, we're not able to put you on that subcommittee. And then on the body worn cameras, I think everybody has served on another committee. So unless Torna, you want to be on the body worn camera subcommittee, and I can see you in chat, so confirm if you'd like to. Okay, thank you very much. You don't want to be on that committee. In that case, Mo, I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think we're full on both committees. Sorry, that was a bit of a runaround, everyone.
We got it in the end. Do we need to vote on that? I'm looking at my facilitation team.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to read aloud who I believe is on each committee, and then I'm going to entertain a motion. I'm hoping that we can just do a motion for both.
I approve the slate for the motion.
Let me read it first, Silver.
Okay.
So for the hiring and training subcommittee, I've got Midas, Alai, Justin, Dee, Leah, Sandra, and Jason. And for the body worn camera subcommittee, I've got Ems, Joel, Sandra, Silver, Erica, Abdul Rahman, and Macy.
So moved.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Who was that? You're really quick.
That was David.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna start at the bottom again. Marty,
Yes.
Midas,
Yes.
Sandra,
Yes.
Leticia,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Rick Rosetta,
Yes.
Marvin,
Yes.
Guadalupe,
Yes.
Tana, now that I know you're here, if you'll type in the box, I would love to count your vote. I see yes in the chat box. Thank you. Silver,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Erica,
Yes.
Rick Hamilton, are you muted?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Eve,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Abdul Rahman,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
Dee,
Yes.
Macy,
Yes.
Betsy,
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
and Em.
Yes.
All right, go team. The motion passes unanimously. You've got your subcommittees. Item number 7. I'm passing the mic to Kaz.
Okay. One moment. So we have a proposal for subcommittees based on what the committee has kind of ended up doing de facto with the Community Oversight Subcommittee. The idea is basically that we would have subcommittees have 2 meetings instead of 1. The first meeting to discuss general issues, prioritize what they want to talk about, and to begin the process of discussing motions. And the second meeting devoted entirely to motions that have been pre-drafted and that could also be shared with subject matter experts if people so felt. And obviously this would cut into the number of subcommittees we could have. So there is a calculation to be made there. I think we secured 10 subcommittee meetings, which would mean that we could effectively have 5 subcommittees. So I think it's fairly self-explanatory. If anybody has any questions, please ask them now. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve the plan for subcommittees as written.
So moved.
Move.
A second.
So
Who
was that
moved
Marvin
that?
and Daniel? I caught. Marvin, just to confirm, you moved, yes?
Correct.
Okay. Right. So if we could take a roll call on that one. Mo, I'm going to rely on you again for that.
I know this is my favorite thing to do. Ems,
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
Betsy,
Yes.
Macy,
Yes.
Dee,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
Abdulrahman,
Yes.
Lindsay,
She just chatted that she left.
oh, all right, thank you. Ebe,
Yes.
Rick Hamilton,
Yes.
Erica,
Yes.
Jason took off too. Justin,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Silver,
Yes.
Tana, are you still on? Yes. Guadalupe,
Yes.
Marvin,
Yes.
okay, Rick, Rosetta,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Leticia,
Yes.
Sandra,
Yes.
Midas,
Yes.
and Marty.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Good job. Okay, so the next, that's it, yeah? Am I missing anything, Kaz and Kevin?
We also have the discussion of the meeting schedule, but that can wait till the next meeting because the next meeting on the 5th has already been agreed as part of the old schedule. So if I could take 2 or 3 minutes from the agenda in that meeting, then we can agree that. I don't want to keep anyone longer than we have to.
Okay. Sweet. Well, I thought I was going to ask you for 10 minutes, but I only asked you for 3. Thank you so much for hanging in there with all of us. Have a really wonderful night.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys for being here, overtime and all.
Thank you.
Thank you.